Everybody's seen Rambo. Well, looking at my analytics, it's safe to say that everyone's dad has seen Rambo. Those movies age like milk, by the way. Anyway, what if I told you there was a real-life Rambo? A man whose story is even more unbelievable than that of our favorite anabolic steroid user. The man I'm talking about is the Canadian Sergeant Leo Major. Like many of the most influential people in history, Leo had a terrible relationship with his father. This led him in 1940 to join the Canadian Army to prove his father that he was somebody to be proud of. Which is kinda sad actually. Most wild stories usually start out pretty mundane. Well, not this one. This one is just back-to-back balls-to-the-wall badassery. The first action Leo saw was storming the beaches of Normandy on D-Day. That same day, during a reconnaissance mission, he captured the German half-track. A half-track which happened to contain some German communication equipment and vital secret codes. Only a couple of days later, he encountered an SS patrol where he managed to kill 4 soldiers. However, one of these soldiers managed to throw a phosphorus grenade before dying, which exploded in his face. Luckily he survived, but he didn't need to wear an eye patch for the rest of his life. Any normal, rational human being would take the loss of an eye as a great excuse to get an honorable discharge and just sit out the rest of the war from the comfort of their own home. But you forget that Leo has major daddy issues, combined with a chronic case of huge balls, so that wasn't an option. Despite his doctor's orders, he kept on serving as a scout and a sniper, insisting he only needed one eye to aim his weapon, which is probably one of the most badass things I've ever heard. A couple of months later, during the Battle of the Schelde in the south of the Netherlands, an entire company of recruits had disappeared. Major, together with another scout, were assigned to determine what had happened to them. During that mission, the other scout fell ill, so Major decided to continue alone. That evening, while sheltering in an abandoned house, he spotted 2 German soldiers walking along the dike. He captured the first one, used him as bait to capture the other, and ordered the captured soldiers to bring them to the officer. That officer too surrendered, together with his entire 100-man company, apart from the 3 that refused and got killed by Major. In a nearby house, some SS troops witnessed the surrender and immediately opened fire upon the group. Major straight up just ignored the fire and marched the 93 survivors to the Canadian base. You're probably wondering why the German commander surrendered so easily. His company outnumbered Major literally 100 to 1. Was he really such a coward, or was there something else going on? Well, my personal theory is that in November 1944, the average German could see the writing on the wall that Germany was going to lose the war. Combine that with the fact that the captured company were from the regular German army, which consisted of regular conscripted civilians, so their will to fight was probably less than that of the ideological fanatics of the SS. For his absolutely bonkers accomplishment of capturing more than 90 enemy soldiers, Major was chosen to receive the Distinguished Conduct Medal. However, he declined because General Montgomery, who was to present him the award, was quote-unquote incompetent and in no position to be giving out medals. Losing his eye wouldn't be Major's only close encounter with the Grim Reaper. In February 1945, he was helping a chaplain load corpses into a universal carrier. When they finished, the chaplain took the driver's seat while Major jumped on the back. Not even 10 meters further, they struck a landmine, which killed the chaplain immediately. Major, on the other hand, had an angel on his shoulder. He was thrown into the air and landed on his back. Luckily for him, he had been drinking enough milk, so he didn't break anything apart from perhaps a slight dent in his ego. Because at the beginning of April 1945, he was back in action. His regiment was approaching the Dutch city of Zwolle. The city was well fortified, so the Canadians were planning on a costly and grinding siege of the city. Major, together with his friend Corporal Arsenault, volunteered to do a reconnaissance mission in the city and to make contact with the Dutch resistance before the artillery barrage would begin. That night, after leaving a farmhouse, Major and Arsenault got spotted and Arsenault was gunned down. Instead of returning back to base camp, Major decided to finish the mission himself. He armed himself with whatever weapons he could find and as many grenades as he could carry and decided to liberate the city on his own. He came across a German staff car and forced one of the Germans, whom he had captured, to drive through the streets with the lights on while waving a white flag. In the meantime, he was standing up, frantically shooting his gun in the air and throwing grenades wherever he saw fit, all in a bid to convince the Germans that a large Canadian assault had begun, which is about the most manly thing I can imagine. When he ran out of grenades, he went to the local German headquarters and set it on fire. His plan ultimately worked. The Germans thought the Canadians had started their assault of the city and had promptly fled. At 4 AM he collected the body of his friend Arsenault and returned back to camp. You know what I find most fascinating about this story? That the car was able to drive under the weight of his absolutely gargantuan balls. But his story doesn't end here. While he did take a 5-year break from kicking ass, he wasn't done, because World War II's little, less famous brother had just arrived. The Korean War. On November 22nd, a Chinese force numbering around 40,000 men had bunkered down on Hill 227 and had almost surrounded the Canadian forces. That night, under the cover of darkness, a group of elite snipers, led by Major, sneaked up the hill and opened fire amidst the Chinese forces. The Chinese were utterly disorientated and couldn't figure out where the fire was coming from, so they ordered a retreat. However, about 1.5 hours later, the Chinese counterattacked with 14,000 men. Major and his 18, I repeat, 18 snipers managed to hold off the attack for 3 days until finally being relieved by the Americans. I'm afraid that's where the badass stories end. After the Korean War, Major lived a long and arguably happy life until his death in 2008 at the ribald age of 87. Anyway, that's all for today, and I'll see you guys in the next video. Thank you for watching.